Do you want to tell us about yourself?
Oh, that's a good idea. Yeah, you need to know that up front. Okay, so I've been a visual artist, a professional visual artist for over 30 years. And my work took various forms. I was a stone carver. I was really interested in the Renaissance, and I wanted to be able to carve like Michelangelo. And for 10 years, I worked towards that goal. And at some point, I was able to carve a hand as like a realistic hand as could be. And I just felt done, like that Forrest Gump thing where he's running, and all of a sudden he's like, I'm done. It was a surprise to me that, oh my gosh, there's nowhere else to go with stone carving. Then I moved to New York and then influenced by the city, and through years and years of exploration into different mediums, trying to find my unique voice as an artist. I stumbled upon thread spools used as pixels, and that catapulted an international career and took me in directions that I didn't anticipate. That the works I realized based on my observations of people observing my work, that they were giving people experiential components of how the brain is actually doing the seeing. It's not the eyes. And so I started exploring vision, the biology of vision, and it took my work in totally different directions, put me on panels with neuroscientists, Nobel laureates, and craziness. And I got really, really into understanding the visual world as it really is versus how we think it is. And that is the link that brings art and dogs together for me, that I've spent so many years dissecting seeing and realizing that what we're seeing is the result of what our brains are looking for versus what's coming in. That I was seeing things in my dogs that I didn't even realize other people weren't seeing in their dogs. And eventually I realized the reason my dogs are so joyful and engaged, regardless of the breed and the dog, is because I am seeing joy and happiness, and I'm acknowledging it, I'm responding to it, so that my dogs then give me more of that. So, and I didn't really have much of this in clear consciousness until I started putting together Ocean. That it's funny how teaching something and having to communicate creates so much clarity for the instructor. I think the instructor maybe learns more than even the students, or as much as the students, as you go. And so I've noticed that since I started in March or April, that Ocean, the concepts, the philosophy, the way I talk about it has evolved incredibly, and it's going to continue to evolve. Why wouldn't it? That each experience I have helping a person solve their dog's external behavior problem, leads to a different way of talking about it, leads to me thinking about it in new ways, and and I continue to work with my own dogs, deepening our communication. So. And there is truly, in my opinion, no limit to how deep you can go with your dog, how much you can see, and how deeply you can communicate. It's infinite. So that's where I'm at with this.
Yeah, I've been, even though I haven't been participating in a lot of your stuff, I'm enjoying everything, like how you see what you see.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you. I have to say that the longer I do this, the more talks I do, the less structured they are. Because depending on, and especially if people have an opportunity to be interacting, then I go in the direction that like people are most interested in, because this can go in any direction. This, like I'm just going to grab one that's very recent, is in the Ocean ongoing membership, that two people asked this question of how do you get anxious dogs to be less anxious at home? And before I answer big questions like that, I really think about it in terms of my life, my dogs, and the dog breeds that they have. So a lot of people I know are involved in agility, so they have high drive working dogs. And it got me thinking about that we have a pretty easy time motivating our dogs, doing the sports. If we're decent trainers, that's the easy part. And yet living with, say, a border collie, if you're not on a ranch, that you're going to have some issues that somebody with a whippet isn't going to have, or somebody with a little, a small kind of dog that was bred to be a lap dog, a pet dog, that kind of thing. and how that's where the real growth in communication can occur for people with border collies, because border collies are going to let you get away with all sorts of stuff, as will the Belgians. If you get a good, a good temperament working dog, that you can be a pretty crappy trainer and you can not even be that rewarding. The dog will be like, okay, let's do something, anything. I don't care that you suck. Like, I'm going to keep doing it, versus a more typical dog's going to go, you suck, I don't know what you mean, and I'm just out of here. And they'll sniff or go run off or bark and spin and whatever that dog does. So as I was thinking in the weeks leading up to this talk about how to deal with anxiety and fear with dogs in day-to-day life, I'm of course looking at my own dogs, and I realized that there are some things that I've just been going, oh, that's just the way Dakota is. He's a border collie, very high drive, herding lines. Like there's, and I found ways to work around his hysteria about being touched on his feet, on his legs, on his butt, on his tail. And at the age of 6, he is so much better. Like I can now touch his tail and touch his legs, but he's very jumpy and skittish about it. And so toenail care is this huge ordeal that I've treated like an external behavior, classical desensitization stuff with him. And I've gotten to a point where, yes, we can get it done. Is it pleasant? No. Is it pleasant for me? No. For him, no. We just do it. And it's, like, can he lay down? Is he willing to lay down? Yes. Is he willing to put his foot on top of these clippers? Yes. Is he willing to let me clip one toe? Yes. Then he jumps and then we start all over again. And so that is just a background thing. So Dakota has some kind of orthopedic issue, and he's had 2 consultations so far, and it's inconclusive. So I need to get him for one more consultation. The reason it's inconclusive is because there was something I was noticing about his motion that was like something wasn't right, like a loss of rhythm. And I'd ask people, like, does anything look wrong with him? They're like, no, he looks fine, looks fine. And I'm like, gosh, I just couldn't get rid of this nagging feeling for months and months that something was not quite right. And so I finally did slow-mo video, and I saw what was not quite right. The hitch was apparent. And so then I thought, okay, I stopped doing agility and started making appointments at the vets. And knowing that he's not going to be called for exams, especially if I can't go in to help, that I just told him, you're going to have to sedate him. And so I envisioned sedation as dog is knocked out and they do the exam. Well, I didn't realize dog is slightly sedated, and my dog was putting up massive fight, and he came out of the first exam a little bit lame on the other rear leg. And I couldn't understand how that could be until the second vet's the one that told me that a sedated dog isn't completely unconscious, and that Dakota put up a big fight. And I thought, oh, now I know why he was a little lame, is he became the tripod, right, to not be flipped on his side. And they flipped him on his side, and that right leg would be on the lower side. And so he had some tweaking. So now here I am going, I've got one more appointment to go, and I've got the potential for surgery. And part of the recovery for that is the dog needs to accept passive range of motion in these rear stifles. And in my mind, I'm thinking, this is just, I can't do it. He will never let me do it. How are we going to get around this? And I'm thinking of all these different ways. And then finally, I just shifted my perspective and went, okay, I need to expand my consciousness beyond this external focus that I have. And so I went to, I don't know if you've been following my interest in Warwick Schiller, but and I grew up around horses, so I relate to it at that level. And I thought, okay, I love listening to his videos. I found one in his paid subscription that is talking about a nervous horse, about not feet, obviously, something else. And I just thought, I watched it and I went, okay, I got to treat Dakota like a horse. Like, I can't make him do it. If he were 1,200 pounds versus 40 pounds, how would I do this? And that shift in perspective caused me to come up with this technique where I'm gently pushing. He's lying down like a sphinx. I'm gently pushing on his shoulder, and he doesn't release. And so I release. I tell him, good boy, give him a little piece of kibble. So I'm pushing, I'm slightly releasing, giving the kibble. So after 3 to 5 reps, I push, and then he offers the ever so slightest muscle change in under that hand. So I remove my hand and say, good dog, give him kibble. Within a few minutes, we go from that to him voluntarily flopping on his side. And I'm like, there is the difference between treating a dog like an animal you can push around and treating a horse like an animal you can't. So he was able to release the tension in his shoulder, in his whole upper body, and allow himself to, he trusts me. So anyway, so he's going on the easy side. I realize he's not quite relaxed. And, so now I'm starting to manipulate all the legs, and I'm doing this now for a week or two. And while I'm building duration, I'm adding all the variation you want with anything you're training. So I'm just, working with the front legs, and I'm basically jiggling. So I'm holding his front leg and kind of asking him, can you release the tension in your shoulder joint? And so now it's like floppy, like nothing. And then can you release it in your elbow? And can you release it in your wrist? And at each point, he was willing to release all that. And I had no objective to this other than he needs to, deal with this exam, and he needs to deal with passive range of motion after the surgery, which helped me start at the beginning every single time. I didn't have a goal, like you would for, I need to have my running dog walk done before this trial, like a goal that kind of gets you not wanting to start at the beginning again. This is more just this passive thing I'm doing. Anyway, and I'm just working with front feet because we're working, I'm doing different things with him. I'm not even thinking anything. So about 10 days into it, I need to start fading the kibble, and that creates a whole other energy level because the kibble's kind of suppressing his energy a little bit. And all this time, what he's learning is not to let somebody examine him. What he's learning is how to calm down his nervous system from a reactive state that he's always, or for a long time, been reactive about. And this is what I didn't know was happening. And here's how I know it was happening is a couple of days ago, I was trimming Lil's toenails, and on the bed, she's sitting there with the setup that he knows. So he's trotting around nervously going, oh my God, Lil's getting her toenails trimmed. Oh, can you believe it? And every clip sound, oh, there's a clip sound, and blah, blah, blah. But this time, as I'm clipping her nails, I turn and he's sitting like in a meditative stance, very upright, looking at me, calm, but alert. And I'm like, what the hell? What's that? So I finished Lil's toenails, and I call him up there, and he lays down, and I clip the first nail. And as soon as he hears the clip and feels the pressure, he jumps involuntarily. And yet his state of mind doesn't really change. So I do the second one, he jumps. And by the third nail, there's no more reactivity, nervous system reactivity. And I do all the front feet.
Wow.
So then I'm thinking, oh my gosh. Right? Like I wasn't even trying to work on toenails. The side thing, getting floppy front feet, is just basically saying, hey, you can relax on your side. Nothing bad's going to happen. So now that's been multiple days, and he still is, jumpy with trying to get him on the hard side, which I'm sure is the side that he put up the struggle and blah, blah, blah. And he comes out of that, like a bat out of hell. He kind of pounce up and then, like smushy on me to end it. It does all this funny stuff. So it's not like I've got this perfect end behavior, but in his day-to-day life, I now see a level of calmness in him. So it's across the board, there's been a shift. So I think what he learned to do is to calm down a reactive nervous system on his own, because now when we're hiking, he has a different energy. And perhaps I have a different energy, where we have just gone to a different level of trust and relaxation with each other. And now, like, he's off leash in places I normally wouldn't let him off leash. And I can just tell he is rock solid. And instead of like jumping off the bed as soon as Lil jumps on, he's now hanging out, relaxing on the bed. So all of this nervous system reactivity has been changed, altered because of this one thing. And what I thought I was training was an external behavior, relaxation, but there's this back and forth, a feedback loop between the brain and all the nerves and the muscles and everything. So by creating relaxation in his shoulder, that created relaxation in his mental and emotional state, which created relaxation all the way down the nervous system, which ends at the feet. So that's why the feet got better. And once he realized that he has a way of calming, of instantly going from reactivity, and I don't mean reactivity the way most people and dogs think of it. I think of reactivity as a reaction to anything in the environment that, you know, is not a choice. That there was some reactivity in him that he now can self-regulate away from that and realize, oh, there's nothing here to be tense about. So it's a perfect example of the depths of observing your dog, and you don't even have to know what you're doing to actually have something happen, as long as you're willing to keep observing and to go, well, that's weird. I wonder why this is happening. And then live in that question instead of trying to go, oh, well, he's that way because, you know, it's 10 o'clock and he's hungry and blah, blah, blah. It's just kind of questioning, like, what is happening here? And really being in this question instead of, like, it's human nature to want to get answers. Like, we're not comfortable going, I don't know. And so we'll make up these answers and stick to them. So, I mean, that's just one example of something that has transformed well beyond this external thing that I was trying to train. So really, there are people in Ocean who are now going to be exploring this with their dogs, who are also reactive about their feet being done. But it's not even about the feet being done, you know? And it's the same thing with, you know, a dog that doesn't recall. Yeah, you can practice recalls till you're blue in the face, but that's an expression of an underlying issue, that the dog is not responding, connecting to the handler. So, and one thing that's become really clear for me, especially with toenails being a good example, is if what you're doing isn't creating results, isn't moving in the direction you want to move, if you're stuck at a level, then chances are very good that you're dealing with an effect versus the cause. And so noticing, just kind of saying, okay, that's the effect. And I accepted the effect. I was dealing with toenail issues and I was getting to the point where we're dealing with jumpy toenail. But I didn't realize that we hit the plateau because that was the effect, not the cause of. He didn't have a toenail problem. He didn't have a toe problem. He had a nervous system. He didn't know how to calm down because he does trust me, but he had a reactivity based on past history, and it was expressing as toenail issues. And I mean, it's a great concrete example of how, you know, if you focus on fixing the external expression, that you're going to be banging your head against the wall. And the life is just telling us, you know, whether we're dealing with that or the cause based on the kind of results we're getting. And if you're not getting results, then you just keep exploring this thing. And I'm doing all the way around with my hands from all these different angles. And eventually, if you're open-minded and observing your dog, you're going to get that aha moment where you're going to at least have something new to try. And you're going to learn something about your dog that will likely have ripples well beyond the thing that you even, you know, are focusing that you have a problem on. That, you know, the core issues solve a lot of problems. And one other thing I found with these dogs in Ocean, the teams that have had remarkable transformations, including the people, not just the dogs, is that when they get down to the core issue, they realize they didn't have 4 problems. They had 1 problem that was expressing in 4 different ways. And so for Dakota, that 1 problem was expressing in many different ways. You know, it's sensitivity to toes being touched, sensitivity to rear feet, tail, body being touched. And I think even a reactivity to environmental, you know, events, that since that's changed, I have to go, okay, that's related, because why would that change right now if it wasn't related to that? So this was a huge thing for him. And I mean, now it's going to be part of Ocean. Like you know, it is a great thing for everybody to explore with their dogs. You know, truly setting it up where the animal can cooperate or not cooperate for real, not pretend, not like, you know, you think you're giving your dog choice, but in fact, you're, you know, doing Spock mind meld vibe on them, right? You're wanting to get the result you want. You want your dog to lie down. So when they release a little pressure, in your mind, you're going to press a little bit more. You're not going to release. You're going to do the opposite. And I myself, if I'm not paying attention, I will get into that with him. So I have to keep very clear about when he releases, I release. And it's just a simple example of how hard it is to be fully present, you know, and clear about our intentions. I mean, it's probably, this is pretty advanced for people to start there. And, I think in Ocean that I've set up this structure that starts a lot easier. So you're not doing this complex thing I was doing with Dakota, but it really starts in a way that you're just observing your dog in day-to-day life and just making note of all the things your dog is doing that is annoying, but you don't care enough to do anything about it, and it's not really a problem. And as you begin to start becoming conscious of all these little nuances of your dog, eventually you're going to start making connections between those little annoying nuances and perhaps some of your performance problems in your dog sport, or like I've said, a recall problem. You're going to see that there are other ways that's expressing itself where you can work on it, instead of just, having terrible recalls and never having a dog that can either be off leash or, that doesn't come when called. So
we do have a question for you here.
Yeah.
Lou wants to know, what about opposition reflex? She pushes back.
Yeah, and so I love that the longer people have been involved in dog training, the more we go to classical dog training stuff. And I mean, I love oppositional reflex when I'm using it for building, let's say, forward focus. And the way a lot of people do oppositional reflex is they create so much pressure, right? And the dog is, some people even pull the dog off their front legs in the air, pulling on the collar, and they think that's oppositional reflex. For me, that's this extreme, take it to the 100th degree oppositional reflex. So the way I think of oppositional reflex is I put my fingertips on the front of my dog's shoulder blades, and the slightest opposition my dog gives me, that's the release. It's this gentle play of energy instead of intense force. And so for me, the mindset of a dog who's so tuned into my fingertips, gently pressing on their shoulders, pressing ever so slightly back, and that's the release, I think is just a beautiful subtlety, versus where people want to take it as dog trainers into this whole, I don't know. I have a personal thing against that, pulling the collar and the dog is hanging. Their front feet are up in the air. It is a common thing. And I think there's one known trainer who made that a common thing. But in Ocean, I have people like step back and look at everything that they're doing. And, and look at your dog's state. Is that really the state you want your dog in? Or are you trying to evoke oppositional reflex? And you could do it in a kind of cooperative way. Which I consider my way. So opposition reflex in terms of this shoulder thing, so the dog has a natural desire to push back against you. So what you're now doing is creating a different mindset. So this is choice. So that's reflex. That's reactivity, really, right? Because the dog isn't choosing to do oppositional reflex. That's evoking an instinct. So by me releasing slight pressure, saying good dog, and my dogs know, based on Ocean principles, that good dog is praise that is sometimes followed with an external reward, such as food or a toy, but not always. So praise itself is rewarding. Now my dog is going, okay, there's pressure on my shoulder. I'm pushing back against it or not releasing from it. And then there's ever so slight, he felt the relaxation of me a little bit. And he just tested it once, that third or fifth rep. He just went, let me do that too. And I'm like, good dog. Hand goes away. Dog gets a treat. And it took a couple of times for him to go, oh, we're doing a trick. We're doing a trick here. And I don't have to do the trick, because he wouldn't do it every time. So I put my hand there, doesn't do it. I release my hand, good dog. Or I remove a little pressure, good dog. So I'm just giving him this experience of feeling pressure and choosing to either release it himself or let me release it. And the way I know that learning was taking place is, in the first session, he went from pushing against me to flopping on his side. So that tells me everything that I was doing was clear communication to him. So I love working with the thinking part of the dog, and they're so smart. If you're consistent, if you're able to mark the thing they're getting rewarded for. And I had to be able to mark when he released a little bit of pressure. I needed to be able to say, good boy, right at that moment. and then give him kibble and let him figure out what is the thing that means the good boy. And if you're very consistent with your timing, they do figure it out. So I hope that makes sense.